Hi, um, these are some notes on chapter 5 that discusses models of small group development. Researchers are often looking at the development of small groups and their work through a lifespan approach. That means that groups develop from a beginning through a growing stage, and they come to an end like any living being. um, in this lifespan process, it is naturally that groups would have a history. Individuals may have a history together, or every person has a history with other groups, or that particular group which other people have just joined, maybe. So history exists inside and outside of groups, and people bring their experiences from other places, other groups, into every situation. And maturity is not only the history, but also the ability for a group to achieve its goals. Maturity means that group members are task oriented, working cooperatively towards the group's goal, and it is in a sum the ability and willingness of each group to move through its developmental process successfully. So the chapter discusses three developmental models, and to understand those models a little better, it begins with a case of friends discussing spring break in Cancun. So I would suggest reading from the textbook. I hope you all have your textbook, reading the dialogue, and try to apply the concepts that I will introduce and the book introduces in chapter 5. Those concepts as they apply to the group dynamic described in that case study. So the first developmental model is Tuchman's five-phase model. Tuchman developed this in 1965. I should mention our media folks that this is not Gay Tuchman. This is, I think, Bruce Tuchman in 1965. Divided the model into phases, into temporal parts. The first is forming. Members come together with their own reasons of joining the group. So how some people are assigned to a group, other people just join. We discussed those things in previous chapters, those motives for joining. Some have no choice, other do have a choice and wish to be part of it because of a friend or another interest. So that's the introduction. It's called forming. The next stage is storming. Members begin active participation, so they just tackle the idea, tackle the task, bring their ideas, their talent, depending on the nature of the work they do together. It could be, let's say, concert. It could be building something. They bring their abilities together. Norming. The third phrase is norming. The group works together and tries to get along. And this is when they will try and resolve differences, and also establish order, and establish sanctions if there is a need of such a thing. So there are two ways of acting in the norming phase. Conformity is when a group agrees to its decisions, all members agree. And deviance occurs when a group member disagrees with the group decision, regardless of the majority's opinion. So the group may decide or even seem to have reached a consensus, but some people may actually feel differently. And I think deviance is when members of a group show their disagreement, not just feel, but also express, because everything we do and examine in communication, it needs to be communicated. It cannot be thought. The fourth stage is performing. The group does the work and prepares the task for evaluation by itself and external audiences, their superiors or their consumer. And finally, journeying. The group completes the task and maybe distributes their product, their project and adjourns, says farewell. Some people are sad, others are happy. So some people leave the group as friends, and I would say that the adjourning part continues. Afterwards, people would know each other from working together. Say, I was with such and such, in that committee. I know that person. So the adjournment is actually the departure from the group, but it also leaves you with some familiarity, some experience, and the history. The first concept we discussed, the history of a group. So you bring this history into the other activities throughout your life. The next model is Gersig's punctuated equilibrium model. This was introduced in 1988. Groups progress through a period of inertia punctuated by a period of concentrated change, as Gersig observed. So she's saying that that the group's work is not equally distributed over a period of time, but there is procrastination, then a lot of work, to put it in rough terms. She argues that groups follow temporal periods of development, which she labeled as phases. Phase 1 lasts until the group reaches the midpoint of its allotted time to complete the task. That midpoint is considered to be a transition. That word is used to indicate the midpoint, the transition point. That's also a time to find ways of working well, consult with stakeholders, so concentrate on the task a little more when the group reaches the midpoint. A good example, your semester is divided into midterms. The semester has a midterm, and so that's the midpoint. So I think the academic system is following the Gersig's punctuated equilibrium model, in the sense that it allows you to get acquainted with the class, and then the midpoint is the checkpoint, and it transitions into the final effort. Phase 2 is marked by a little more work done without the urgency of finishing. So this could be the second part of the semester. Of course, well, not all semesters are alike, but not the finals. So it's not the final push. It is a lot more work because there is momentum already. You've gained momentum. So the third phase, completion, is the time for finishing touches on your project, on the task, and that's the natural end of the group's work. Another model is created by Pooley. Pooley's multiple sequence model. Pooley believes that groups do not always follow a rigid phase-like approach, but there are 3 dimensions to the group's work, and sometimes those 3 aspects overlap or coexist. He believes that 3 types of activity tracks do not follow a logical or time sequence. These are process activities, relational activities, and topical focus. So the first one is the task process, in which members analyze the task by using various procedures, analysis, evaluations. The relational activities, during those activities, which can happen simultaneously or overlapping, one is not finished, the second one starts. So you may be dealing with procedures, analysis, brainstorming, but at the same time engaging in learning about each other, working together, developing relationships and cohesion. And at this time, how to handle conflict, that those decisions could come up, let's say, again, sanctions or norms or procedures. So the third one is the topical focus, when members concern themselves with major issues or themes that come up during the process, in the process of reaching towards the goal. So these topics were not the task, but they're part of it. And as it happens, groups may actually assign topics to smaller groups, subcommittees, for example. So These are important issues still, but they become agenda items only after the group reaches a certain point, and finds it necessary to address those issues. So switching from one activity track to another is considered a break point, and it actually helps the group develop consensus. So there are three kinds of breakpoints. One is normal breakpoint. It occurs when the group goes from one topic to another, shifts focus from one aspect of the task to another. A delay breakpoint occurs when the group decides to re-examine a position or needs to repeat some parts of a task, or in our case, it could be tabled if we have a task to complete. We were trying to reach a vote, and decide that it needs to be delayed with more consultation, etc. So there needs to be more work before the group's activity continues. So that is called the delay breakpoint. And the third one is disruption breakpoint. It occurs when conflict forces the group to stop working, or failure forces the group to re-evaluate its position. After each breakpoint, the group needs to get back on track. And the chapter suggests examining the case study to learn which kinds of breakpoints are happening there, and what are the roommates using? How do they get back to their task? So the last part is characteristics of group development, and you will read about this more thoroughly, because there's a lot to read, and I don't want to reiterate because I believe you all have your books. So questions such as how cohesive is the group? How does the group handle conflict? How does the group balance its task and socio-emotional needs? How does the group communicate? Interesting point that over years, if a group exists for a long time, pseudo work talk decreases. People stop wasting time, but they just get to the point because they actually they develop this focus and maybe socialize outside of it already, outside of the group. And finally, how involved is the group with its task? So there is a lot to read. I trust you do have your textbook. I don't want to regurgitate. I just want to make contact with you through the lecture. But a fun assignment: use Pulley's 3 activity tracks to analyze the movie The Breakfast Club. Find it on your favorite streaming service if you can. If it's not too expensive, it should be free or very cheap. And try to understand which track did the group follow the most in Breakfast Club. How might other types of groups differ in their activity patterns? So this was chapter 5, and I think my lectures may tend to be briefer because we will introduce some other work. Next time we will not only have a quiz but also engage in our group work, and I would like to hear from you regarding your position on confidentiality on our group assignment. How do we handle that? And these are all normal parts of working as a group. As you read the chapters of our textbook, you'll see that these are essential parts, essential phases of our group work development. So I sent emails to all of you. Please look at those, and we'll see each other again next time. Thank you.